Assemble! Stay dandy, baby. Netflix is setting off some major fireworks this summer with the hotly anticipated release of the third season of its hit show, Stranger Things, and it couldn't possibly get more 80s than this. Greetings, my friends, I'm the Ace Guru, and today we're going to do things a little differently. Typically, I mostly talk about anime, but today I want to talk about one of my favorite things right now, which is the Netflix original series, Stranger Things, which has definitely been, I think, one of the biggest shows for the platform ever since the release of its very first season back in 2016. Now, I'm not here to tell you what the entire story of Stranger Things is all about. Basically, the long and short of it, it's basically what would happen if H.P. Lovecraft directed The Goonies. Today I'm going to give my thoughts and give you a quick review of the third season of the show, which completely blew me away with its amazing quality, and how the show has managed to evolve over the years and give us a season which not only manages to top the first two, but also paves the way for the future of what might be one of the most popular internet-based television shows. So like I said, if you want to learn a little bit more about Stranger Things, well, Google that shit, or better yet, just go watch the show. I'm also going to try and keep spoilers to a minimum, as I want you guys to experience the show for yourself, but be warned, a few just might make their way through the cracks. So Stranger Things Season 3, I think, is sort of like the culmination of the entire series thus far. It's what it's truly been building up to, which is a coming-of-age story. And I think one of the most brilliant things about Stranger Things is watching these kids actually grow up. They're the cornerstone of the entire story, and all of them do return for this season, and it's actually handled in a very realistic way of what happens when kids going from being young kids to being teenagers. It's pretty normal when you go from being a little kid to being a teenager that you start to see the world in a completely different way. You start to get embarrassed by childish things. You start getting attracted to girls or boys. You basically go through puberty, and it sucks really hard. And aside from all the giant goopy monsters attacking the citizens of Hawkins, really it's this sort of element which is driving a wedge through the friendship of the main characters of this series, with every single one of them experiencing it in a different way, such as Mike, who still has a relationship with Eleven, which is now getting a lot more physical and a lot more emotional. They're basically boyfriend and girlfriend here, and you get to see that this really seems to upset his group of friends, in particular Jane's adopted father, Officer Hopper, who is not really happy about the fact that his newly adopted daughter is constantly hanging out with a boy and possibly doing other things with him. He's incredibly protective of her in this season, and you might either love that or you might hate it this season, as he goes completely to the edge of what he's willing to do to keep these characters apart from one another. But then you have Lucas and Max, who formed a relationship at the end of the last season, and here it continues, and it feels like a natural evolution here. I'd be hard-pressed if I didn't mention Dustin, one of my favorite characters from the entire series, who returns from summer camp with the prospect of having a girlfriend who may or may not exist. And again, this is just something that sort of like separates him from his other friends. He has no true way to sort of relate to them in the sense that they've all formed these new relationships. And then there's the outlier, which is Will, the character who has the most bad luck throughout all of the entire seasons. It wasn't bad enough that he was already banished to the Upside Down in the first one, seeing visions of the Mind Flayer monster in the second. Here, he's completely alienated by all of his friends who have formed brand new relationships, and you can tell that it truly upsets him. And while he still has his family to back them up, they're also going through their very own problems, with Jonathan and Nancy still having a relationship, him trying to work for the local newspaper, and his mother who's still reeling over the death of her boyfriend, Bob. However, my favorite returning character for the series, without a shadow of a doubt, has got to be the character of Steve, who initially started off as the douchebag boyfriend, but like a lot of the other characters in the series, managed to present himself in a pretty sympathetic manner, and we get to see what actually happens to him after he graduates from high school. And it's a pretty sad story. The super popular jockey guy ended up being something of a failure, being forced to work at the mall at a lowly frickin' ice cream place called Scoops Ahoy, but this is where he forms a relationship with a girl who goes by the name of Robin, who's a prospective love interest, but I'll let you guys see how that actually plays out. It's a pretty nice twist by the end, and Robin also ends up being a really great counterpoint to Steve as well, being the exact opposite of him in many ways. Not exactly being the most popular girl in school, and being forced to work with someone who is basically the most popular guy around. And their entire dynamic is fun, especially how they end up working with Dustin. It was an unlikely partnership in the last season. Here, here, it's played to full effect, and I absolutely love it. I think one of the coolest and most hilarious things is how Steve is like best friends with this middle schooler. It could come across as creepy, but it mostly just comes across as a lot of fun and leads to some of the best scenes of the entire season. Hell, even Lucas's sister Erica, who is a total bitch for the most part, ends up being one of the biggest highlights of this season. But all this character development is basically just the backbone of what this entire season is all about, which is about a crazy Russian conspiracy to open up a giant shopping mall, which is actually a cover for scientists opening up a hole to the other dimension known as the Upside Down, so that they can do some sort of weird, crazy Soviet stuff. They don't really get into it all that much, but I mean, it's the 80s, and if it's the 80s, the Russians are evil. I have to admit, it's actually kind of silly the way that it's actually handled, and it totally feels like an 80s movie, but then again, I think that was actually the purpose of the entire series. And to top it all off, we also have the return of the Mind Flayer, an other dimensional beast, which is trying to make its way into the real world, and it can only do this with a human host. And who's better than Billy from Season 2, who initially came across as kind of a weird sociopathic bully who was obsessed with taking down Lucas and trying to ruin Max's life. Here, they actually managed to make him a pretty sympathetic character, and it's made even more sympathetic when you realize that he's actually possessed by this creature, which is going around Hawkins and taking over the minds and bodies of people, as well as local animals, and having them explode into a bunch of goo so that it can form together like a giant blob monster of itself. I have to say, the monster effects have truly exploded in this season, and it's definitely, I think, the best stuff that I've actually seen in terms of the special effects from Stranger Things. The Mind Flayer in this season is easily, without a shadow of a doubt, the coolest monster from Stranger Things. And watching it start off as this weird little blob and transform into this giant spidery demon attacking a mall and running through the streets like a Godzilla monster is honestly pretty damned awe-inspiring. Of course, though, one of my favorite things about Stranger Things is how it manages to embrace 80s culture, and I think this is the season which really takes it to a new level. Not only is just the wardrobe of the characters way more reflective of the time, but this is also set in 1985, which is about as 80s as it freaking gets. It's the absolute heart of the decade, where a lot of the culture, such as music and movies and food, really made their impact on the decade. And there's just so many things I could talk about here. I could make an entire video just about the 80s references. I myself am always a good fan of 80s movies references, but this one just has it in spades. Everything from The Terminator to Day of the Dead, Fast Times at Ridgemont High, Back to the Future 9 to 5, and of course, The Never-Ending Story. If you thought the Never-Ending Story theme was awesome before, wait till you see what they do with it in this season. And this is all supplemented by amazing 80s music as well. Everything from REO Speedwagon to Cutting Crew, Madonna, The Cars, and more. Even distinctive food products are used in this season. They use New Coke a lot in this season and definitely have a lot of fun with that. And I myself was incredibly happy to at least see a box of Mr. T's cereal.
I pity the poor fool! Don't eat my cereal!
But let's get to the brass tacks of this season, what it's really ultimately all about, which is the characters going through changes, growing up, going through puberty, deciding what it means to truly be a friend to someone, to abandon friends to have a relationship, to give up the past and move on to something new. That's what this entire season ultimately hinges upon, whether it be the actual kid characters themselves, or even the relationship between Hopper and Joyce. Two characters who seem like they're perfectly made for one another. You almost expect a relationship to definitely happen between these characters, and ultimately, it doesn't really have a fairy tale ending. In fact, the way the entire season ends is honestly one of the darkest of the entire series, but again, opens up just a massive plethora of things that could possibly happen for the future of Stranger Things. Don't get me wrong, this is actually a pretty definitive ending to a show, but there's definitely more coming down the pipeline. The world of Stranger Things is going to explode into something a lot bigger when we move on to the next seasons, and it's probably going to feel the most different than it ever has before. Ultimately, I think that this was one of the most focused seasons of Stranger Things in terms of what it was trying to accomplish. Not only expanding on the town of Hawkins and all of its citizens, but showing us that the scope of the Upside Down is not only confined to just this little town, but could very well be over the entire world itself. It's fun, it's goofy, it's irreverent, it loves the 80s, and it wants you to know it. Stranger Things Season 3 is a fantastic experience, and it's 8 episodes of amazingness that you have got to check out. If you were into classic 80s horror films, or even stuff like The Goonies, or even John Hughes films, you gotta check out Stranger Things. I wish I could go into more detail. Maybe I'll do a spoiler video later on. I just wanted to give my quick thoughts on the show and how it's evolved and how it's managed to have my attention since the beginning. I cannot wait for more. But I want to hear your thoughts. Are any of you guys fans of the Stranger Things series on Netflix? Did you get a chance to see the 3rd season of the show? Which season is your favorite, and what do you hope to see from the future of the franchise? Let's have a discussion about it in the comments section below. So thank you all again for watching this video. Make sure to stay tuned for the channel for tons of other topic discussion videos, reactions, and even reviews. And if you guys would like to go the extra mile and help support this channel, please check out my Patreon and PayPal account. Word to the wise, if any of you donate $10 or more on my Patreon, I will review an anime series of your choice. So thank you all again for watching. I'll see you all next time, and as always, stay dandy, baby. Turn around, tell me what you see.